This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Listen up and welcome back to another episode of the Tapped In Sales Podcast, your podcast for beer distributors by beer distributors. I'm your hostess with the Moses Bud, here with Moneyball Ross and Data Mike. And this week we have had lots of sad news, and the more sad news keeps coming as we just posted the worst week since April, down 6% on volume, 5% on dollars, the third bad week in a row. The industry's official answer is it's gotten too hot outside. Which last thing is that we need like another fucking weather report, right? Which that'll have to get bleeped, but that's another problem for editor Bud. Meanwhile, we are seeing some more distributor deals happen as well. We don't talk about those very often, but I wanted to as well. And they're happening in the middle of the selling season too, like middle of the busy season, which is kind of crazy. So the real question this week isn't what happened, it's what is everybody doing and where do the continued challenges come from? Ross, do you want to outline what the challenges continue to be?
I feel like a broken record here. First question. Ready for the first question. Is the Strait open?
Nope.
What are fuel prices doing?
High.
Okay. I'm going to add to that. We're going to spice it up here. What are energy prices doing?
High.
Okay. What is inflation doing?
How are those groceries doing?
Inflation is still high.
Okay. I mean, everybody was stoked. I mean, the market celebrated the fact that our year over year inflation is 3.4. What's the Fed target rate?
2.
Okay. What was PPI?
That was high.
Well, yeah, but we celebrated because it was on target. It was as predicted, 4.7%.
Oh my gosh.
And that's the leading indicator for what's coming because our suppliers are facing 4.7% inflation. I suspect it's actually higher because it's probably skewed towards the metals, which is aluminum, which is towards labor. So, I mean,
and for those of us
I was optimistic going into the 4th of July because the war was supposed to be over. Inflation was heading back towards 2, but here we are again. And
for those of us novice economists out there, PPI is is that producer
price index.
There it is, producer price index, where CPI is the consumer side of that coin. The PPI is the producer side of that coin. So their inputs is basically what that's like. You can look at it as like a differential, right, Ross? Are the inputs growing faster than the cost of goods on the shelf? And right now, the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not usually talked about in mainstream media, and even financial media, it's not. It's given less importance than the CPI. So, obviously as distributors, we're more focused on the consumer, and that's important. But I think as we look towards the future, we need to be thinking about what inflation is loading up, what's in the pipeline. And if inflation is showing 4.7% still on the producer side, that has a tendency to find its way to the consumer side because our producers, i.e. Anheuser-Busch, Molson Coors, they have two options, right? They can either eat it in their margins or they can pass it along. And I don't need to I don't need to be Nostradamus to tell you that they're probably going to pass it along.
Yeah, duh. And this shows up in quarterly meetings and quarterly pricing planning across the board. Every industry has these same curiosity and same questions, is that they look at their cost of goods and they look at their cost of production and they look at their margins. Are they maintaining margins or eroding margins? In this type of environment, most of these officers are looking at this and saying, hey, we're having eroding margins. So how do we get that margin back? We have to then do price increases. And whether you're selling door handles, hinges, shingles, lumber, beer, whatever it is, like this is happening across the board for folks. So that's where that, PPI comes into play. And you're right, Ross, not a lot of people look at it. It's one of the things that I look at regularly because I don't know, because I'm a nerd about it too. So, but it's something you look at too. From beer volumes, we talked about moving into August where there was some still loose optimism. Now we're kind of midway through the month. Now we've been meeting with clients partway through. We feel poorly, Mikey. We have sad feelings. Is anybody resetting expectations mid-month?
Yeah, definitely some frowny faces out there. We talk about it as industry theory right now of the whole industry being down, but Ross and I are having these conversations almost daily with clients right now, where we're seeing a lot of soft numbers. I wouldn't even classify them as soft. I would call them poor,
Horrific,
right?
horrific.
Horrific, poor. Soft is down 6. What we're reporting, that's down 6 on what? On the whole year. I mean, because down 6 would be a lovely story. What we're actually seeing right now is down 10, down 11, and
15.
15, and missing projections, missing the goals that were set. On top of that, though, I mean, there is a positive side of that because most of these cases and clients that we've been meeting with, they're still growing GP. They're still growing GP per CE on that volume loss, and ultimately at the end of the day, it's what are you doing to grow that GP per CE, right? What are you doing? What are you doing with the market that you have to actually control it? So we're having those conversations, but yeah, we've had some clients, right out of the gate go, did we set bad goals? Do we need to reassess these goals? And we've had some clients come right in and say, hey, we totally messed up. We didn't realize the amount of volume that was going to shift into September because of the calendar alignment, right? And the holiday coming later. And then go back to the table and readjust those original budgets and actually soften up the goals for August, pre-leading into what's going to be a much larger than anticipated September because of that too.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been more sad about jumping on calls because I generally will review the client's material before I jump on the call. And a lot of these clients are the mid-month check-ins, so they're relatively new clients. Um, and yeah, the volumetric numbers are just awful. But a good number of them have been around long enough. Yes, their GP is big enough that even if they're down 10, they could be flat down 10% on volume, they could be flat on GP. That's a silver lining. But I have I'm hard pressed to think about a month that started off this poorly. And what's worse is there's nothing to look forward to because as we're looking towards the end of August, the holiday's too far away from the end, and everybody that's in the industry knows what I'm talking about. Like, there's just no build out coming in the end of August, and I hate to say it, but Labor Day is becoming less and less of an important holiday. I feel like over time that's been the case. I mean, when I was in the industry 15 years ago, it was a big holiday. But everybody's back to school now. It's not like it was 15, 20 years ago where the kids didn't go back to school until the middle of September because it was too freaking hot. And you remember those big box fans, and we didn't have air conditioning back then at our schools. And now they go back to school seemingly earlier and earlier. I mean, third week of August, they're back in school.
Certain markets, the kids are already back in school. It's crazy. Yeah.
I mean, it used to be that was the last hurrah of summer, but if your kids are in school, where the hell are you going?
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people are beating themselves up this month too. And you kind of really still have to take a step back and look into your organization, right? Because there are some routes that are still performing fairly well in these market conditions. There are some that are falling right in the average. There are some that are below that average too, right? And that industry number really gives you context, but then it's like, show me the routes, right? Who's outperforming the market? Who's underperforming it? What packages, what accounts, what channel, what supplier, right? What are we actually doing to manage this? And then you're going to really find that some people are, not just going with the flow of the market, but they're really taking what the market's doing, right, and adding on to that to where. And what I'm trying to say from that is we are total beverage distributors. Almost every one of the clients and people that are listening to this are total beverage distributors. What we focus and laser focus on is Bevel. I mean, that's where we go.
Preach.
So when the market gets tough in that segment, we have to see what else the market can do for us, right? And that in this situation is probably going to be the non-alcoholic or everything else that's in our portfolio. Heck, we have people selling, salty snacks and things like that. Where else can I capture some of those dollars so when our volume does take this dip, it doesn't hurt the P&L as much as it would as if volume or if the GP was following those volume trends.
There's a really interesting character in the industry. His name is Brian Rosen, and I don't know if you two have seen him before, but he's from InvestBev, and I've talked about him a couple times. But InvestBev does a bunch of investments in the beverage space. Really fascinating story where his family ran one of the largest liquor distributors in the Chicagoland area. They sold the business. He stayed in the industry through basically a private equity, investment firm that specializes in just investing in the beverage space. So lots of insights, lots of, interesting ways that he manages money in the space. And he continues to talk about, like, yes, beverage alcohol has struggled, but consumer or CPG beverage, so packaged beverage as a whole, continues to grow at 4 to 4.5 on an annualized basis. So, what are you doing as a distributor to capture part of that growth? And how are you leveraging? Because that growth is out there. And if we do, Mike, focus so much on exclusively beverage alcohol and lament or concern or tunnel vision ourselves in that space, yeah, the numbers don't look good, but what can you do to continue to evolve and change and adjust and shift what you're doing so you can still survive and keep the business sustainable through challenging times like this? So I would, there's opportunities out there everywhere. Everybody's got a ton of stuff in their portfolio, and how you're taking advantage of it. Are you having conversations, Mike, and being more full throated with clients around engaging the reps on the non-beverage alcohol items of the portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. Even before we started really digging into the August numbers, we ran a lot of training sessions, kind of retraining, right? Like a refresher session over the last few weeks. And that's really one of the parts of the market that we dig into the most, right? Total store, total account, total portfolio. And it's so easy right now if I'm a rep, it's so easy to tell my boss, that's what the market did to me, right? But it's not as easy for me to tell my boss, this is what I did with the market that was given to me. And that's kind of what separates the people that are just going to fall down that path and say, it's a shitty market, man. There's nothing I can do about it. And those people that you're going to see on the top every single month that are taking that market and doing something a little bit different with it. We had a really good conversation this week with another client. We were looking at goals and projections. And there was one team that really stood out, right? They have a brand new, like, high-end team and projected 45% over target, right? 145%. And you look at that and you're like, oh man, that team's killing it, right? But then when you really dig into it, it's a whole new team that was put in place in accounts that were being underserviced before. So right now we have the proper amount of service, the proper amount of attention. Same market, same consumer, basically the same products, new attention, right? So there's that shift too of how much attention is actually going into total store, total portfolio to kind of not really climb out of this hump, because I don't know if it can climb out of the hump completely, but it can offset it.
That's what you two have talked a lot about. And what I always looked at running our beer distributor was centered around, what can I do to offset the volume losses? How do I efficiently do that as sophisticated, smart, and as easy as possible? Because we were never going to stop volume loss, right? I succumbed to that attitude many, many moons ago, especially in our market. Other markets, you got socioeconomics growth or just general population growth. I think it's a different concept in certain markets. But in Michigan, where we were at, Mike, we were never going to grow volumetrically, right? Just not a reliable path forward without a massive change in the portfolio structure, like lots of NAs. Monster was a good example. When you have something like that, it becomes such a big part of the portfolio. They'd have different opinions on that or different thought processes around that. But we're not going to dramatically change the outcome volumetrically on total business, particularly in beverage alcohol. So for me, it was, how do we make the business more sustainable? And Ross, this is where you came into my life and started to talk to me about, well, we have to focus on the dollars and the profitability, because if we can influence that, that's where we can decouple ourselves from the volumetric losses and grow profits independent with the portfolio and the tools you have in your tool chest to be able to still be sustainable, grow the bottom line, and continue to do what you're doing year in and year out. And that's what I learned so much of starting to work with you, Ross.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that are going to come face to face with that realization here. And I think it's going to happen across all the different scales of the business. And I'm starting to see it. And there's a lot of, sayings around this. Like, the Buffett one was when the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked. There's another one that's, the struggle is what breeds really resiliency, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all the things we talked about. It's time to focus inward at your business and realize that the days of consistent 5% growth are probably gone. The big suppliers are preparing for it. And yes, what does that look like? That's how you deal with your non-traditional portfolio, how you deal with your margin mix, how you prioritize your suppliers inside your portfolio, how you think about points of distribution instead of just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks, but being really rational about where you're sticking things to maximize returns times profitability for your business, not just for the suppliers. And it's for the suppliers' benefit too. They benefit from being in the right places, doing the right things. It's what we talked about last week. It's, are you leaving 5% on the table because you're not appropriately covering routes when there's people out of the office or out sick or whatnot? I mean, going across the topics we've talked about, now is the time, if not now, when, in terms of dealing with streamlining and optimizing the business for the challenges that lie ahead, which unfortunately it's probably going to sustain for a while. And if it doesn't, great. Now we've laid a foundation for profitable growth. So either way, either you do it now because it's survival, but I think the benefit is if you do it now and we turn the corner sometime in 27, now you're just going to have growth, profitable growth on top of growth. So you're just going to amplify you and slingshot you out the other side of this. So again, if not now, when?
And families, it's getting tough out there. Families are making decisions. You've got 6 distributor deals that have announced since the start of summer. In under 2 months during peak selling season. You've got big houses in the Northeast. You've got the RNDC stuff. You got what I found fascinating, Russ, Breakthrough pulled out of their deal with RNDC, and Keg One picked up that one of the locations in Kentucky. So like people are making decisions. And to me, when I talk to owners and operators about this that are in tough spots, it comes down to how do you want to make your business sustainable? We have done this for many, many moons, many, many years, and sustainable has a tone in today's environment centered around green energy. And, we're going to have all this abundance around solar power and wind and everything else. But if you really think about it, sustainability is the ability to do what you're doing today, next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after, and for many, many decades to become. And that's what I want owner and operators to start to think about and start to talk to their teams about is how do I make what we're doing more sustainable? And that isn't exclusively cutting costs. We can get so efficient, and if you have costs to cut, do them. And also think about what you've always said, Ross. Cutting 5% and growing 5% are 2 completely different numbers. And they're 2 completely different outcomes. They're also, one is really, really painful and one is a lot of fun. And if you could choose to do both, you should. And you can walk and chew gum and do both too. You can go back and listen to an episode that we did with Charlie Brown. I don't remember what episode that was, but if you go search in the history, he did both at the same time. We talked about this. He did a whole reorg structure, did a cost analysis, and reorganized his delivery and route to market with his sales, and who figured out a way to grow the business at the exact same time. And, through the partnership with VXP to talk our own book. Those are the things that the successful and sustainable operators are going to continue to do for the folks that want to be around in this business for the long.
Talking about cost cutting, it makes me want to really challenge where some of that cutting is coming from, because naturally volume declines, we cut routes, right? That's just naturally where our brain initially goes. But I do want to circle back to something that came up this week that I already kind of touched a little bit, and that was the accounts that weren't being serviced properly, right? And the attention, right? It takes me right back to sometimes the difference in the market is not so much the market, but it's the amount of attention that those accounts are getting. And especially if they're highly influential accounts, right? Some of our top, maybe high-end accounts. And now we've had to cut some routes, we've had to cut some manpower. We don't have the time to dedicate to some of those accounts that require that, right? then you're going to see even more of a volume loss. And the client that we were talking to earlier, they basically took like 160 high-end accounts that were not being serviced all that well and created a dedicated team. 3 people, team lead, right? And suddenly those routes look completely different. Same account, same market, different level of attention, right? So when you talk about removing people because volume's down, kind of scares me a little bit because we've seen the opposite happen. And the right attention and the right accounts can really turn volume around, and especially profitability.
Let's
Right.
let's
So
double click in that a little bit more, Mikey. Are these routes, the
And I know what
structure,
you're talking about.
are they overlapping existing reps, or are they saying, hey, these were 160 accounts, there's only one rep that's going to call on them, and it's this new team, and we're moving this new team to isolate, and they're going full book in this, or are they sitting on top of an existing team as a secondary?
more of our situation that we had with Dave, where
Okay.
we had a pocket. It wasn't 160 accounts. I think for us it was like 9.
Yeah.
But we really dissected our market, right? And we had some just accounts that are just accounts, right? We had some accounts that were more than accounts. They needed somebody to talk to. They needed somebody to sell to them, really, right? And have that extra time in there to do that. And we watched that go so far. That was huge for us. That was a turning point where we could say, hey, we're going to make your route a little bit smaller as far as the number of stops you need to hit, but the importance of your routes is huge because you have some really important customers, you have some really important accounts, and you need to have the time to dedicate to them to get what we're trying to achieve. And it worked. It worked for us, and we watched it work for this other client. Well, in the numbers at least, right? That we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing so far. So when we start talking about cost cutting, that is one aspect that we really just need to pay attention to as well. How thin are we really trimming everything out? Are we causing people to run in, grab an order, grab inventory, and run out? Because we don't want to get to that position either, because then we're just going to accelerate that volume decline. And then we're going to watch our GP, our profitability, catch up to that volume decline. And in the long run, nobody wants to be there.
I mean, it's that conversation we had about how we optimize who calls in what's accounts. Some of those accounts, I know what you're talking about, probably came out of Telcel too. And others were just on routes and they were buried beneath big accounts and just weren't being serviced properly. Success happens at the margin. And this is what we're talking about, which is growing where you can grow. And when I mean grow, I mean profitably grow. That these accounts were underserviced potentially, and they are just perfect for the non-beer portfolio alignment too. And it's it's those territories that we're just not covering properly from a relief perspective. It's the who's calling on the accounts, where we have impact, and again, it happens at the margin. We're not going to be able to build a big enough display to get ourselves out of it, like at the big account. You can't just add 80 cases to it and assume that it's going to change anything. But we can move the needle at some of these smaller accounts by 40%. Cool. You do that across 160 accounts, now you got a real number.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you can easily see the payroll savings on a P&L by cutting a sales position.
Yep.
But there's no accounting line for the value of attention that person was giving to those accounts, right? You can't put a value on that on a P&L. But there is value in that extra attention that obviously costs some dollars, some overall money to basically have somebody have that special attention in there. But what you were getting in return was much more valuable.
We make our money pennies and nickels and dimes at a time. And because we do so much volume and just scalability of the businesses, that's how all the dollars hit the bottom line. So a penny, a nickel to us is a ton of dollars at the end of the day when it's all figured out. So that's digging deep, and that client's example is digging deep and really squeezing out the pennies and nickels to find those opportunities for sure. And meaningful probably over the long run if these results continue to, play out as well. And I love how interesting that is and how they're thinking about that business differently too for themselves as well. Because this is news to me. So I'm just, kind of like, wrestling with this right now and digesting it right now. Mikey, do you think that portfolio, because the other thing that we're seeing is that RTD is continuing to rock. Good Boy Vodka posts the fastest growth of any top 50 brand family in beer, wine, or spirits over the last 4 weeks, up almost 150% to 8 million. This is all in Circana data. That puts it ahead of Millbest, Founders, and Goose Island and Shiner. Those are huge brands that it's ahead of now. There's now 14 RTD families sitting inside the top 50 list. Sazerac buys a UK vodka brand called U Vodka. Maybe that's how we say it. I don't know. People struggle with neutral. We'll see how they struggle with U Vodka. Although, fun fact, I cannot spell neutral the right way anymore. If I'm
You
trying to say
can't.
I put my car in neutral, I spell it like neutral the brand. Like my brain cannot process the difference between the two. So maybe it does work. But they bought that for reported, just shy of 700 million. You've got Buzzballs out there with AB rocking and rolling with growth as well. So, Mikey, portfolio structure in these accounts are these accounts like RTD centric? Are they not RTDC centric? Like, what are you thinking there?
Are you referring to the scenario we were talking about with those high end accounts?
Yes.
Just overall general. I don't think it technically has to be like, hey, this is a super high end account because they sell a lot of RTDs or they sell a lot of high end vodka or tequila. It is the account structure, the level of influence you can have in that account, right? How much leeway and you have, but also what is the return on our, as you always say, effort in that account, right? So yeah, it could be a high RTD account. It could also be a really high craft account, or it could be a great liquor account. And it really needs to just take a deep dive into your own account structure. And we talk about this a lot on setup calls when we're going through like objectives and incentives because we have those templates, right? And I'm kind of shocked at the amount of distributors that don't have whether it be a template, a list, selection set, whatever, for their most influential on-premise accounts, right? And their most influential, or I wouldn't want to use the word important, but basically they are important off-premise accounts. And that could be a really small group of 5, or that could be a group of 160 to 300. But those on-premise accounts are huge too. They're influential, right? Those where the people go. When you get something on tap, everybody's going to try it because everybody goes there, right? Whether it's in a college market or you have, event center or something like that's bringing people in. That's where your sampling happens. But it's really market by market, and it doesn't have to dictate whether it's just RTD or just this segment or that segment. Where do you have the influence, and where you're going to get your return on investment out of it?
Yeah. We seeing any clients? I did talk to a client recently that said they're still figuring out how to grow GP despite the lack of RTDs in their portfolio as well. Trying to get them to join the pod. I asked them to as well. I think that's great to hear too, that you can still find those opportunities, and they don't have RTDs as part of their portfolio because the legislation in their state doesn't allow them to. So there's some legislative challenges in that world for them specifically. And that is true. That doesn't happen in every state where, you can typically sell RTDs. There are some that don't, or some that can't in our world of beverage alcohol too. So you can't just lean on this all the time, over and over and over again. Ross, anything to add on this segment? Do we see this slowing down? Like you and I, when we were on the craft portal side, saw the steep rise of the malt business and the steep decline of the malt business, and then got out of that business and are now seeing the steep rise of RTD seltzers. Are we seeing it continue in your mind? Do you think it flattens out, shallows out, or is it a roller coaster back down as well?
I mean, I'm just a guy that has, his own drinking preferences. I think at the end of the day, we have to follow the trends of the market. And, we used to do a lot better job of forecasting these things for our clients when we were on the supplier side. So hopefully the suppliers are watching these trends and waiting for it to turn over, because we saw it the early stages of it with malt. We saw the turn long before the industry did. So I'd be watching essentially the rate of growth. And if it starts to decelerate, that's the first sign that you're rolling over. That being said, maybe this is a category that's going to rise and plateau. But as a distributor, I think you have to follow the consumer and what they're willing to buy, what's going to turn, what's profiting to turn. It's very profitable products, and they're turning. So we need to lean into that until it doesn't work, and then we need to lean into what's next. And we need to move. Again, our industry's changed a lot. We need to be dynamic, and we need to move with the consumer.
Oh.
And that's our job now is to be reactive with a large, diverse portfolio.
My gut tells me that the category is going to be around and durable for a much longer time period than the malt is. And the reason why, in my mind right now, is that you see a widening of not necessarily the base, but the widening of the top of the pyramid, right? So there's always lots of brand entrants. If you think about a pyramid, there's lots of brand entrants that come in a new category, and very few of them make it to the tippy top that are owners in power, and they kind of like control everything. High Noon was that for this category. They were the only game in town, and you would expect, if it played out like malt, you would expect that they would stay the primary player. But over the last 5 or 6 years, there have been more people that have reached the top and have widened the top of that, triangle or pyramid versus malt, where it kind of stayed as the top two people owned the market for the longest time and still basically do. And that'd be White Claw, really.
Yeah, I think that those were much more marketing driven. I think that taste wise, this is a better product. I think
way better.
I think the thing to overcome was the price. And for some reason, the consumers decided that that's okay. And again, maybe that's the K-shaped economy. But I think the limiting factor to the category, in my mind, was always pricing. And the consumer doesn't seem to care.
Yeah.
At least that consumer doesn't care. Maybe they're all invested in Tesla and AI stocks. So they're good to go.
Here we go again. Is Tesla. Get in on your Tesla and AI stock. Get your SpaceX, everybody. Get your SpaceX.
Yeah, everybody missed out. It was a buck or a 105. I was waiting for 100. Didn't quite make it.
I just find it very interesting, Ross, that that dollars and cents, because I had felt the same way that we're just the dollars, $60 for carbless, $57 for, Good Boy, Cutwater is huge in that number as well too, that we would just run out of steam at those price points. And there's been zero run out of steam.
Nope.
It's the better for you attitude. It's the better premiumized product. People want to drink it because of taste, but also I think what it says about them have it in their hand as well too.
It falls right into how I open almost every single on-site kickoff meeting in person, right? People are spending more money to drink less.
Yes.
And they are. And they don't mind doing it. Whether it's a better for you product, whether it tastes better, whether I look cooler with it in my hand, or I just care for it. They're spending more money to drink less volume at the end of the day.
I wanted to touch on Molson Coors real quick because that as a supplier, STRs are down about 6% in the first half, including the gains from Monaco and Fever Tree. So the company's losing more share, like Molson Coors is just losing more share than anybody else. Coors Light's down, Miller Light's down. They're 60% of the business. Keystone Light's down, Blue Moon's down. The only thing that's doing well is Banquet, is their only grower in the top 10. And if you zoom out even farther and you look at the longer run, Molson Coors is down almost 25 million barrels, or about 40% from their peak in 2028, which AB would be down more because they were a larger, more market share owner from time to time. But also, pound for pound, I think that change hurts Molson Coors more than anybody else. So I find it really interesting, and I wanted to kind of pull on this thread to throw out a projection or throw out a prediction as well, that I predicted that Molson Coors would buy carbless. I actually am going to change, and I think carbless will stay solo on their own. I think AB will have the capacity and the wherewithal to buy Good Boy sometime in the next 18 months.
Well, two things on that. One, can't change your predictions in August. That's bullshit. Throw that out the window.
Well, I can say it was half right. I'm making a new one.
I hope that doesn't happen. I love Good Boy, just because it was founded 45 minutes from my house, right? That's where the founder lives and still is from. So in this area, it's been around for a long time, well before it was on the national platform. And I've always rooted for that brand because of what their story and what they believe in and everything and how it was built and all that good stuff. No knocks against AB. I just like to see brands like that stay little, right? And not go to a big house, because we've seen what happens when some of these smaller brands can go to a bigger supplier and they get bought out. And I hope it's not back to the original, if you can't beat them, delete them. But I don't know what AB would be competing with in that segment. They don't have, we've talked about this many times, they don't have a good tea, right? Especially in the RTD category. Made a couple tries, a couple good runs and failed. So it would be a good move for them.
Well, the brand is more than just tea too, Mike. It fits into that. Like Neutral is a good brand, and it's kind of spinning in space, right? It's not really growing. It's not really declining. In some markets it's growing. In some markets it's declining, but it's not capturing the attention and the growth that like AB is looking for in that 5% ABV category.
It doesn't have a story, the narrative.
They have a huge winner in Cutwater. It's got a story. It's a leader. Like, it's just continuing to dominate. Like, they own that segment, as AB does, better than anybody else. And it doesn't seem like anybody wants to fucking compete with them on that world. Maybe Sazerac is going to figure out something. Sazerac's the only one who looks like they're trying from the outside on a supplier that's trying to do stuff or trying to buy things or trying to bring things to market. They're the only ones who looks like it. Molson Coors ain't doing nothing. And the other big RTD providers or suppliers are not doing nothing against Cutwater either. It's just being on its left alone. It's doing its thing. So I think AB needs something, Mike, that's in that 5% category that has a story and has a better vantage point for it. And if you put Cutwater, that, Good Boy, or if you could put Cutwater, Neutral, Good Boy, and Beatbox all together under the same portfolio, like, they're set up for a long time in that flavored alcohol area where they're doing well. They've got some of the best new to world brands out there, and they're going to continue to grow for the foreseeable future. So that's what I would put out there as something that's going to happen.
I think this might fall back into my prediction with Surfside, because Surfside's growth, right, is not as strong as it was. I wouldn't call it declining, but it's not growing at the same pace because Good Boy is eating into a lot of that. So it might be a better value for AB to go after Surfside, still capture what that brand has and build it from there instead of the evaluation of Good Boy. And plus, on the other side too, Alex Pratt, the founder of Good Boy, he doesn't need the money. He didn't get into this for the money, right? He had already had money. He built a brand around a cause and wanted something for his own thing. So I don't know if his inspiration behind starting Good Boy was build a brand and sell it and get rich. So
everybody's got a price, Mike. But at the same time, I'll give you some comfort here too, or I'll push back against Bud, which is it could be a rational play, but there's emotions involved. And I think AB's already made the decision that they're going to fight in that category. And somebody has to let go of their own narrative and admit that there's a better narrative out there. That's a tough one if you've already made the decision to double down on it and fight. So you might get lucky here, Mike.
Might get lucky here, Mike. You never know. They got to drop the lawsuit because they're still fighting each other in court too. So that's still going back.
That's my point.
For that thing to go on, that thing to happen in that direction as well too. So just a lot of stuff going on, and just covered a ton of ground today. Anything else on your guys' mind that we didn't touch on that we need to touch on too?
We moved on too quickly. I'm usually the non-weather guy. You guys tend to be a little bit, especially you, Mike, tend to be more weather driven. So you start out by saying that people are saying it's too hot to drink. I took us into macro, and you guys didn't challenge that at all.
Well, I mean, the last thing they do is another weather report.
The weather conversation. I mean, come on, somebody's got to defend the weather thing.
Last thing they need is another weather report on this podcast from Mike and Bud, from Weather Bud and Weather Mike. I do have some cool new stuff for you guys as well.
Look at that.
Our new tapped in hat out there. Will never be made again. If anybody wants one, they can hit us up at info@vxptech.com. That's info@vxptech.com. Mike, I have one with your name on it. Mike or Ross, as you as well.
Awesome.
Do I get that in Orlando?
You will get it in Orlando for sure. I know. If you need it before, I can bring it to you when we meet before as well.
Oh, that's right. We do have a meeting before.
Yes.
Cheers a Butte, Clark. I can't wait to get my hands on one of those.
You, Clark. Well, thanks for listening out there in listener land. If you like what we're doing, continue to listen, subscribe, share with a friend. If you have questions, hit us up with info@vxp.com. That's info@vxptech.com. You all rock. Everybody out there in listener land. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Bud, here with Moneyball Ross and Data Mike. And cheers, boys. We will talk again next week.